All right, let's get started. As I mentioned, my name is Josh Baron, and I am speaking as a representative of Eagle Point Funding. I'm the Director of Business Development, and I'm joined here today with Oriol Bar-Oz, who's our Chief Analyst here. And we're here to talk about a very specific, a very interesting topic, which is the upcoming deadline for the Navy's broad agency announcement, which has a number of different interests and a wide variety of technology. So without further delay, what we'll do here is we'll give a brief overview about 5 or 6 minutes about federal funding as a mechanism for those of us that are newer to this space. And then afterwards, we're going to dive deeper into the federal grant opportunity we're here to discuss, which is that of the Navy. So first and foremost, the most oft question that we get asked is how big is the federal budget for grants? And the answer surprises a lot of people to know that the grant budget, or for the R&D budget in 2018, is $176.8 billion, making it probably the largest investment fund in the world. Now, roughly about 60 billion to 70 billion of that goes to private industry, and the rest is going to a mix of colleges or public institutions, labs spread out over the country, as well as internal R&D projects, which each federal agency holds itself. When you look at the Navy, and that is where we're going to be doing our deep dive today, we're talking about a budget for 2018 of $18.2 billion, which is a significant chunk of the overall budget and an even bigger chunk of the Department of Defense's budget. Grants include all R&D expenses, including the salaries of anybody who's connected to research and development, subcontractors, instruments, materials, facilities, and administration. And that's a significant point, that facilities and administration typically on a broad agency announcement can be up to or around 20% of the grant. So it's very significant. Those are the non-defined or rent-related costs, etc., that can really help a company get up and running, not just with their R&D, but their general planning on how to run their business long term. When we look at how federal grants differ from typical equity sources, they're called non-dilutive funding for the reason that they do not dilute your equity or control of your company, which means that first and foremost, there are no royalties being taken on by the federal government. There's no external interference or additional board members, and the federal government encourages all researchers to maintain rights, IP rights, intellectual property rights. And beyond that is how federal grants can be leveraged. There are a couple of slides that we won't get to today, but this is one that I would actually like to drill down a little bit more, which is for every federal dollar that is invested in a private company, and this is was studied in 2012 by the Milken Institute, companies are able to net $8.38 in private sector investments in the 8 years following the grant. And this is for the simple reason that federal grants can be leveraged for independent and private investments because it's the hallmark of quality. Once you have been accepted and approved by the federal government, finding approval in the private sector is relatively easy. And that's what we talk about when we talk about leveraging the federal grants for a mix of, first and foremost, for the actual grant itself, what it can provide on an R&D level, how it can provide your company with a long-term basis, but also how it can lead to private investments and potentially a federal contract. Because once you're under the lens of the federal government, the government knows about you. At least one agency knows about your technology in depth. And should they want to invest in it long term, they certainly could do so. And that's going to be very relevant for the grant opportunity that we're talking about today. So the question is, why does the government do it? Well, they do it for a mixture of altruistic as well as economic reasons, which is a pretty solid combination to have together. First and foremost, the federal government knows that a strong industry and strong technology is going to lead to a strong economy and an improved quality of life for U.S. citizens, but also the advancement of technology. And as far as the federal government is concerned, that technology is going to advance the government on the global stage. We know one of the federal agencies is dedicated solely to maintaining superiority of U.S. technology, but surprisingly, the federal government is also investing in international companies, foreign companies. And the reason that they're doing so is because they view it in an altruistic aspect of an advancement of technology. And also, from friendly foreign countries, they also might be interested in long-term contracts. On top of that, and this is true for local companies or U.S.-based companies, the federal government sees an ROI of $2.30 for every federal dollar that they invest in. This is from that same Milken Institute study, because first and foremost, by investing in your technology, the government enables you to create jobs, and job creation is an important part of sustaining the economy, but also you're going to create a product, and that product is going to be sold, and taxes will be collected on that. So the federal government has also an economic interest in investing in your R&D. When we look at the grant mechanisms, it's largely a split between SBIR and everything else. And the reason I say that is because SBIR or STTR, which is grants which are reserved for small businesses, is a relatively small chunk of the pie. Today we're going to talk about a broad agency announcement, which represents the other 96+% of federal grants. And it's important to talk about broad agency announcements in this moment because, first and foremost, they have some clear advantages over small business grants, and that they are typically for longer-term funding, typically in the period of 2 to 5 years, and they have higher award ceilings. Grants can be $100,000, or they could also be $150 million. It really depends on what your budget needs are, and also what the budget constraints are of the specific grant authority and that giving that grant, and the grant specifically itself. And there are broad topics of interest. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chief analyst, Oriel Bar-Oz, to talk about what we're here to talk about today, which is the Department of Navy's long-range broad agency announcement.
Okay, so thank you very much, Josh, for the introduction, and hello to everyone who's joined us today for this webinar. I'd like to take you on a short tour, slightly deeper into this specific LRBAA, or Long Range Broad Agency Announcement. That's the full name. This time we're focusing on the Navy. Before we delve straight into the BAA itself, just a few pointers, general points to take notice of as I describe the BAA itself. Please bear in mind first that there is, and you will see it in the slides, there is some overlap in technological topics between the different departments within the Navy. That is because of the various applications that the Navy is interested in within its own structure. So when considering to apply to a BAA, it is very important to read it thoroughly, understand exactly what the Navy within its different departments is interested in, and then you'll know which department or departments, plural, are the most relevant for you. Second, you might be surprised to find out that some of the topics that you'll see here are not traditionally Navy topics, meaning you're not going to see only boats and submarines. The Navy is a very large and quite powerful agency, and under the DoD has lots and lots of areas of interest. So you might be surprised at what you see. And last, don't be alarmed if you don't specifically see yourself covered under at least one of the topics, although I doubt it. There are lots and lots of them. Even if you do, it doesn't mean that you're not fit for the Navy, even not necessarily for this specific BAA. The reason these are called broad agency announcements is just that. Sometimes the agencies are not quite sure what they're looking for, and they just throw out a fishing line and see what comes up. So at least in some of the departments, you will see general topics under which you can still apply even if you didn't find yourself under a specific one. And one last point you can see on the bottom of the page here, we're discussing a specific BAA today, and this one ends really quite soon, at the end of September this year. That means deadline as far as we're concerned for working and actually applying for this BAA is the end of this month, August 30th, 2018. So if you're interested, don't delay. So moving right ahead, we'll delve into the BAA first. This is divided into departments, like I said. You'll see on the right, it says code 30, next one is 31, and so on. These are the codes, the internal codes for the Navy. And on the top part, you can see the name of the department that covers a specific set of topics within the BAA. So first is the Expeditionary Maneuver Warfare and Combating Terrorism Department. Sounds wide and very general, and for good reason. It covers lots and lots of different software, hardware, and all kinds of platforms, both land and sea borne. At times, I'm sorry, both sea and airborne, sometimes even land-borne. The Navy does have lots of land-based facilities still. The four main topics under this department are electromagnetics for C4, that's command control communications, and then condensed matter physics, so any type of technology dealing specifically with condensed matter and its applications could go under code 30. Chemistry and material science, if you're developing, say, a new type of coding, a new method for material cross domains and so on, then this could be relevant for you. And computer science, as wide as can be. Cyber security, both attack and defense, can go under here, but also networking, communications, algorithm development, and so on. So that's the first department. Second one, under code 31, covers specifically C4 ISR. So again, this one only dealing very, very specifically with computations, computational capabilities, communications, and so on. You can see command, control, combat systems, electronics, both electronic warfare and defense, and its applications. Lots and lots of interest in advanced sensors, both in the sensor arrays themselves and the software that goes behind them, and all types of electromagnetic platforms. That could mean radio signals, it could mean laser and LiDAR, for instance. It could also mean sonar. So any type of sensors or even combined sensor platforms would be relevant under the C4ISR code 31 department. Please notice quantum information sciences. You wouldn't necessarily guess that the Navy is interested in quantum computers, but yes, it is, and there's a specific department for it. So moving along, code 32 is the specific, well, more traditional, say, Navy application. This time specifically for sensors under a naval area of operation. So oceanographic and meteorological observations. So bear in mind, even though this is the Navy and it's under the DoD, not all applications are necessarily directly tied into war fighting capabilities. That was a long sentence, meaning specifically that you're not specifically, you don't necessarily need to be developing any type of weapons platform or defense platform or the like. The Navy is also interested in more traditional aspects of technology, in this case, oceanography and meteorology, for obvious reasons. Modeling prediction of environments, specifically complex environments, obviously, both above water and underwater, mine mitigation, submarine detection, and others. Next, The next department, sea warfare and weapons. So whereas the previous one did not, as I said, necessarily deal with warfighting capabilities, this one does. So increased vessel survivability with all its different applications. Again, new types of armor on the one hand, or new types of, say, electronic warfare on the other. Software, hardware, almost anything goes. Decrease of energy footprint, say increased efficiency or decreased usage are both relevant, or new types of advanced batteries, advanced charging capabilities, and the like are all relevant. And obviously increased increased vessel weapons capabilities, but not necessarily the weapons themselves. So new targeting systems are very, very relevant. New radar systems are very relevant, but of course, new munitions and weapons platforms. Moving along. The next one deals even to a higher resolution, you could say. This is a warfighter performance department, meaning down to the level of the single soldier. Please bear in mind that the Navy has under its wing, or maybe I should say under its deck, the Marines as well, and lots of servicemen. So specifically, advanced training and improvements in manpower training, personnel improvement is very relevant. On the other hand, taking care of the soldiers is also very important. So bioengineering and biorobotic systems, and obviously medical applications and medical technologies, very relevant under Code 34. Next. Okay. Well, not everyone is necessarily aware of it, but the U.S. Navy operates a vast array of airborne assets, both in terms of drones on the one hand, and up to, say, fighter jets launching off of specific platforms at sea. So obviously, the Navy is not interested only in boats and submarines and radars and all the other technologies we've seen so far. It has lots and lots of interest in airborne platforms as well. Again, both weapons, sensing, and both software and hardware, as we described before. But what you can also see under this department is autonomy, meaning autonomous vehicles, both say airborne drones, autonomous drones and their platforms. In some cases, autonomous submarines, mini subs, and the like. So electromagnetic launch, as you can see, is a very specific subtopic here. High-speed conventional earth surface weapons. So anything to do with naval air warfare is relevant under Code 35. Next one. This one, as I mentioned before, I talked about the Marines. I mentioned the Marines. So under the wider BAA that belongs to the Navy, there is a specific section dealing with MCWL, which is the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. This is a sub-program under the same BAA that deals specifically with technology and applications for the U.S. Marine Corps under the U.S. Navy. So almost anything that we described before can also go here, but in addition, you can see some things that we haven't seen before. Amphibious operations and urban operations. We're no longer necessarily at sea or in the air. The Marines operate on land as well. So this is very important and relevant. Simulation and training at the level of the Marine and the Marine unit. Also, look at the bottom, counter shooter and counter surveillance. These are all very, very relevant. Counter IED and mines. Also, under the MCWL, if you didn't see anything specific on this very long list on this page, They specifically mention a subtopic covering other areas of interest, specifically to allow companies that don't necessarily fit into any of the major topics. So on the next slide, you can see here, you can see other supporting missions, such as flexible range non-lethal weapons, safe for crowd control and the like. Systems for improvement of boarding of vessels at sea or on land, technologies that can detect and or neutralize small unmanned aerial systems. In other words, anti-UAS and UAV platforms, and the like, operation in GPS denied environments. So you can see again their willingness to allow almost any type of technology within their sphere of interest to go ahead and try to submit to the Navy. If not under a specific subject, then there are lots and lots of other alternatives under it where you can apply. Now, the next slide is a very important one. This one is called Code 600. This is the Office of Naval Research, the ONR. The ONR owns this BAA. It's the office under the Navy that publishes all BAs. This slide doesn't cover any topics because the Code 600 department, we can call it, is specifically meant for international collaboration. So if anyone was wondering whether or not, as a non-US entity, you could still apply for the US Navy, then the answer is a resounding yes. They actually have a specialized department that deals with international collaboration, that is bringing tools and technology and capabilities from outside the US to assist and collaborate with the US Navy. This is specifically meant for long-range and strategic basic research efforts. So this is not for short-term plans. This is for, say, at least a year, in most cases, at least 2 years of R&D work. So this is relevant for almost any company outside the US that wishes to apply. So so far, I described in slightly more detail the various departments and topics under this BAA. I went through it very quickly. Obviously, I'll guess some of you have questions for it, and next we'll give you some soon. We'll give you some time to ask some questions of us. But I hope this very short and quick overview of the specific topics under this VA helped you to focus a bit more on what it is in this specific case that the Navy is looking for. So thank you, and take it ahead, Josh.
So just quickly, I know for a lot of these companies that are on the call with us are VC-backed. Just so you know, I'm not going to go into the details here, but it's very clear that VC-backed companies have a lot to gain from getting into the federal system. I'm not going to talk about Eagle Point's formula because our time is short here, but just I will talk briefly about our company. We're the biggest company in the consulting for non-dilutive funding space, as a member of Fremont Group, which was established in 1999. We have 70 plus full-time employees, over 150 active clients, and what enables us to find success is a short-term and long-term approach. On the one hand, we have the short-term long-range BAA from the Navy with a pending deadline, which for companies that are willing to take the plunge could be an excellent funding route. On the other hand, we also have a long-term approach, means that we're looking to find multiple opportunities for each client that we partner with in order to maximize the chance to receive large federal funds. And it's been quite successful to date, roughly $70 million annually, or over $1.5 billion in awards to date. So without further ado, if you have any questions, there's a question box on the webinar platform. Please add your questions, and we still have Oriol here on the call with us. So maybe I'll start by asking a question that I get asked often, and since we have our chief analyst on the call, it'd be good to take advantage of his perspective on the matter. Oriol, could you touch a little bit about what the federal government's looking for, specifically the Navy, when it comes to investing in a company for this given technology?
Sure. Okay, so in all cases, in all BAAs, and this one as well, the federal government with its various agencies are looking for revolutionary technology, something new. They're not looking for evolutionary technology. They're not looking for specifically improvements on an existing platform or technology. They want to see something new that they can assist with their grants and to make it into a working product. They are not looking to support commercialization. They're looking to support R&D. So if you're on the cusp of finalizing your product and just about to push it into the market and start selling, probably this is not for you. However, if you are still within deep R&D stages, not just a proof of concept, maybe a bit further along, but you have still lots and lots of R&D work ahead of you, then yes, this is for you. They are looking for internal R&D. That is, they want to see that the company itself has the ability to research and develop, and they're looking for a long-term roadmap. This is not meant for short-term programs. And again, they're not looking for manufacturing or productization. When it comes to integration, it depends on how much of the work is still left to be done and how much R&D is still left. The more R&D, the better. That's basically it.
Okay, thank you very much. I know there's a recurring question that probably a lot of you are having regarding the amount of funds readily available. We touched upon in the beginning of the webinar about the Navy's budget for R&D, which surpasses $17 billion in 2018 alone. Referring to this grant opportunity specifically, there is no publicized details about the budget and the ceilings as well as the minimum amount available per grant. However, seeing as this is the central backbone of the Navy's grant calls for the year of 2018, it's assumed that there's quite a large amount of funding readily available, and so usually what happens is grants work according to the budget needs of the client. So if you have budget needs which surpass another companies, as long as there's a clear justification and the funds are available, then the grant authority will invest in you if they're interested in your technology. And specifically for the Navy, seeing this as their core broad agency announcement of the year, there seems to be like there's a tremendous amount of money available in this particular grant. Oriol, we have a number of questions here that I'd like to get to. One is pretty specific. I'm not sure we're going to get too into it, but we have a question regarding the Navy supporting research funding in the area of photonics for improving solar panels on Navy vessels. That's pretty specific. Oriol, could you answer that?
Okay, so that's very, very specific. And that deserves a lot more attention and delving very, very deeply into the BA in order to try to find out whether or not they're looking for. I can tell you that generally the Navy will be interested in almost all type of technology. In this specific case, I could see that any kind of photonic applications could potentially go under the C4 and or C4 ISR department, that is code 31. But again, it's very specific, and we'll have to understand a bit better what exactly type of technology that means in order to make sure that it fits the BA in at least one of its topics.
Okay, we have another question here from Brennan. Brennan asks, what are the best ways to track down all of the R&D BAA solicitations across the various departments? They can be easy to miss. I'll answer this. Brennan, you're right. they are very easy to miss, and partnering with Eagle Point Funding basically guarantees that you're not going to be missing them, because our analysts are constantly plugged into the system and constantly looking for new opportunities which match your R&D. So the easy answer is to partner with us, and assuming that the technology is there, Brendan. If you have revolutionary technology, and this is a quick overview for all companies that are here on the line, as well as academic institutions or nonprofits that are doing revolutionary research. Eagle Point Funding has criteria. We do not partner with all companies. We partner with companies that have technology which is state-of-the-art and a roadmap which brings them beyond the state-of-the-art, or early-stage technology which maybe hasn't yet reached the state-of-the-art but has clear intentions to go beyond it, as well as companies with capable researchers. So, Brendan, if you're in that space, then we would be happy to have a follow-up conversation following the webinar. We have another question here about whether or not the Navy is interested in brain-computer interface for rapid training and improving human performance of personnel. Oriel, would you like to answer that?
Sure. I'm not sure that this specific BAA does have it. Photonics are covered under this BAA, but brain-computer interfaces, not as such, not specifically a topic for that. However,
Oriel, it's specifically relating to training and improving human performance.
Oh, I'm sorry. So in that case, yeah, I could see it go at least under the MCWL subtopic for the Marine Corps, I think so. I think so. It could be covered under at least one of the general subjects. It is a very new subject. At this opportunity, I'll take this opportunity to reiterate that the agencies use these BAAs at times to find out what's out there. So they cannot and will not cover all topics. This is why they intentionally leave general topics, sometimes called general topics or other applications, exactly for this type of scenario where a company has a new type of technology that wasn't covered under a specific topic, but that they can convince the Navy that it is relevant for them. And in those cases, you could say submit a white paper and see if the Navy is interested, and then move on to a full proposal. In this case, I'm not sure that's an option because of the very short timetables, but still open on the table.
Okay, we have another question here about where would AI for robotics fit?
AI for robotics, I could see that go either under the C4ISR or under Code 30, which is the first and widest department. It covers almost anything. It's the expeditionary maneuver warfare. It has almost everything and anything under it. So robotics definitely relevant, both classic robotics and autonomous platforms.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, Oriel. I think that's it for questions. I haven't seen any questions until additional questions. So moving quickly along, just stay updated if it's relevant for you. There's also a pending deadline for the Department of Energy's SBIR funding topics, and we're going to be replaying the Department of Energy's webinars that they gave at the end of last month on the different topics. So stay tuned for that. There'll be emails going out regarding the opportunities, and also we have on August 15th a webinar regarding robotic tech and sensor and federal funding for those topics. If you are interested in this particular opportunity, or you didn't find yourself and you are interested in making non-dilutive funding a central part of how you would like to conduct your business, and you meet the following criteria: your company is conducting revolutionary research and has a roadmap to take it beyond the current state of the art, and you have a team of researchers, whether it be 1 or 2 researchers or 100 or 200 researchers that are capable of doing what they set out to do, then we'd love to have a chat. We'd love to talk about a little bit about what we do, and if the pairing is right, then we'd be happy to engage in a long-term relationship of receiving non-dilutive funding. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll leave the screen up just for a few minutes so that you could copy down my information. You can directly access my calendar through my Calendly app, or send me an email, or try me throughout the day on my line. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Uriel, for joining us, and take care, everybody.